Modern Queen Tales presents Keeper of Secrets, Master of Lies. Remember to like, subscribe, and above all, enjoy. Without further ado, let's give these pages a flip. Blood dried to the texture of cracked leather on imported Italian marble. I knelt on the chilled floor of the penthouse, my gloved hands working a stiff bristled brush in tight, methodical circles. The chemical bite of industrial-strength bleach stripped the oxygen from the air around me. I scrubbed the grout lines until the crimson stains dissolved into a pale, soapy froth. I wiped the area with a heavy microfiber cloth, leaving the white stone gleaming under the recessed halogen lights. My name is Vallery Abrahams. I manage the physical consequences of the city's most brutal men. When the Nicoletti family or the Russian syndicates needed a room sterilized after a negotiation went bad, they called my pager. I operated under 3 strict rules. I demanded payment in unbanded cash before I unlatched my supplies. I worked alone. I erased every trace of DNA, including my own. The men who ran the underworld treated me like a piece of the architecture. Don Vincent Nicoletti stepped over my kneeling form to pour himself a glass of scotch from his crystal decanter. His Italian leather Oxfords missed my shoulder by 2 inches. He stood at the edge of the blood pool, the amber liquid sloshing against the sides of his glass. He continued his conversation with his underboss Santino, discussing a shipment of stolen automatic weapons arriving at the Brooklyn Naval Yards. Nicoletti laid out the exact bribery amounts for the dock inspectors, speaking the numbers aloud. To him, a woman with her hair tied back in a cheap cotton scarf and her hands submerged in dirty water lacked the capacity to comprehend his empire. I absorbed the information. I was a tool, a mop, a sponge. I soaked up their messes. I held my silence. Santino lit a cigar, letting the heavy ash fall directly onto the carpet I had just vacuumed. I noted the disrespect. I cataloged the brand of the cigar, the specific scent of the tobacco, and the casual arrogance of the gesture. I continued scrubbing the baseboards. I finished the job, collected my $20,000 from the envelope on the kitchen island, packed my plastic caddy, and left the apartment spotless. The scene 3 weeks later in a high-rise suite on the east side demanded my full arsenal of solvents. Pietro, a mid-level lieutenant who had skimmed from the Nicoletti family's protection racket, had met a violent end against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. Splinters of bone and gray matter clung to the heavy velvet drapery. A pool of coagulated blood the size of a dining table saturated the antique Persian rug. The smell of copper and voided bowels hung thick in the climate-controlled air. I began the containment process. I rolled up the ruined rug, sealing it in heavy-duty contractor bags and wrapping the bundles in industrial duct tape. I carried the heavy bags to the service elevator, moving them directly into the incinerator chute in the basement. I returned to the penthouse. I applied specialized enzymatic cleaners to the hardwood underneath the rug, letting the thick white foam eat away the biological residue. The enzymes broke down the proteins, turning the gruesome reality of murder into a harmless liquid I wiped away with industrial sponges. I neutralized the odor with an ozone generator, letting the machine hum in the corner while I focused on the furniture. I moved to Pietro's heavy oak desk to wipe down the brass handles. The desk sat in the center of his home office, a massive piece of furniture dominating the space. A drop of blood had seeped into a hairline fracture along the side panel. I sprayed a microdose of hydrogen peroxide onto a cotton swab. I pressed my thumb against the wood panel to brace my hand. The panel shifted under my weight. A hollow click echoed in the empty room. A false drawer slid outward on silent, oiled runners, revealing a dark, narrow cavity. Inside lay a black, leather-bound ledger. I stripped off my right nitrile glove. I pulled the book into the light of the desk lamp. The pages felt thick and heavy. The leather binding smelled of cedar and old paper. I opened the cover. Rows of meticulous handwriting detailed a comprehensive financial roadmap of the entire city. Pietro had kept insurance. He had recorded every offshore account routing number belonging to the Nicoletis, listing the bank names in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. He had listed the names of every police captain, dock union leader, and superior court judge on the syndicate's payroll, including their exact monthly retainers. He had documented the exact GPS coordinates of the Russian mob's fentanyl processing warehouses in the industrial district. He had noted the precise kickbacks paid to the mayor's zoning commission for the new casino developments. I stared at the black ink. The numbers represented billions of dollars and absolute control over the city. I understood the gravity of the object in my hands. The leather felt warm against my palm. The sheer volume of data represented a loaded gun pointed at the head of every major player in the tri-state area. My employers transformed into an immediate liability. Don Nicoletti would send a specialized crew to tear this room apart looking for Pietro's leverage. When they realized the ledger was missing, they would eliminate the only other person who had occupied the space. Returning the ledger to Nicoletti meant admitting I had found it. He would kill me for simply seeing the pages. My anonymity had protected me for years. Now, my mere existence threatened the foundation of their power. I slid the ledger down the back of my pants, covering the bulge with my oversized navy work shirt. The heavy spine pressed against my spine, a rigid reminder of the danger I carried. I finished cleaning the room. I polished the glass windows until they gleamed, wiping away the streaks of violence. I left the space smelling of lemon, ammonia, and sterile air. I packed my supplies into my rolling cart. I walked out the front door, nodded to the oblivious lobby guard, rode the service elevator to the basement, and vanished into the city. I spent the next 3 nights in my cramped, 4th-floor walk-up apartment decoding Pietro's shorthand. My living room transformed into a tactical war room. I spread detailed city maps across my cheap laminate kitchen table, using red pushpins to mark locations. I cross-referenced the dates in the ledger with archived news reports of seized shipments and unsolved murders. Pietro used a rudimentary substitution cipher for the most sensitive names, shifting the alphabet by 4 letters and reversing the order. I cracked the code in 2 hours using a legal pad and a number 2 pencil. I treated the data like a stubborn stain I needed to break down to its base components. I cataloged the flow of money, tracking the millions moving through front companies and fake charities. I mapped the connections between the politicians and the hitmen. I identified the vulnerabilities in their supply chains. I returned to my schedule. I maintained my routine to avoid raising suspicion. I cleaned the Provenzano family's social club on Tuesdays. The Provenzanos controlled the Northern Territory, bitterly contesting the Nicoletis for the shipping ports and the construction unions. I pushed my cleaning cart through their private cigar lounge, emptying heavy glass ashtrays filled with Cuban stubs and dusting the green felt poker tables. The air smelled of stale smoke, cheap cologne, and anisette. Benito Provenzano, the head of the family, sat in the corner booth arguing with his capos about an intercepted shipment of raw narcotics. He wore a sharp 3-piece suit that strained against his expanding waistline. He slammed his fist on the table, demanding answers. I wiped down the adjacent table with a lemon-scented rag, keeping my head bowed, my movements rhythmic and unobtrusive. I listened to their desperation. I pulled a prepaid burner phone from the deep pocket of my apron. I had purchased the phone with cash at a convenience store 3 towns over. I had programmed the device with a single text message containing the exact route, schedule, and license plate of a Nicoletti weapon transport. I had extracted the transport schedule directly from Pietro's decrypted ledger. The text read, "Nicoletti moving heavy hardware tonight. 95 South, mile marker 14, black panel van. License JKT 882, unguarded." I slipped the phone under the heavy velvet cushion of the booth directly behind Benito. 2 hours later, Benito found the ringing phone. I watched from the hallway, polishing a brass sconce with metal cleaner, as he read the glowing screen. His eyes narrowed. The muscles in his jaw tightened. He waved his capos over, pointing at the message. He mobilized his crew within minutes, sending heavily armed men sprinting out the back door to their waiting SUV. The next day, I serviced the Nicoletti estate in the affluent Western Hills. The mansion sprawled across 10 acres of manicured lawns, surrounded by wrought iron gates and private security patrols. I carried a bundle of fresh Egyptian cotton towels into the guest bathroom near the main study. I pulled a solid silver money clip engraved with the Provenzano family crest from my pocket. I had stolen the clip from Benito's club weeks ago during a routine cleaning. I left the clip on the edge of the marble sink, partially obscured by a decorative soap dish. I placed it right where Nicoletti's head of security would inevitably find it during his daily sweep of the premises. I planted seeds of absolute paranoia. I dropped breadcrumbs of classified information into the laps of rival bosses. I purchased an old mechanical typewriter from a thrift store. I mailed anonymous, typed letters to the Russian syndicate detailing the exact locations of Nicoletti's hidden slush funds and the names of the men guarding them. I fed the police anonymous tips through untraceable public payphones in the subway stations, providing the exact street addresses of buried evidence, illegal gambling dens, and chop shops. I weaponized their own arrogance against them. I moved through their fortresses, a ghost with a feather duster and a bottle of glass cleaner, manipulating the flow of information. They bled each other dry based on the whispers I provided. The underworld collapsed rapidly. A domino effect of retaliation tore through the city. The Provenzanos hijacked the Nicoletti transports on the highway, leaving the drivers tied to the steering wheels and stealing millions in untraceable weaponry. The Nicolettis retaliated by firebombing the Russian warehouses in the garment district. The city skyline glowed orange for 3 consecutive nights. Sirens wailed constantly. The FBI, armed with the account numbers, routing codes, and payroll lists I mailed directly to their field office director, executed simultaneous dawn raids. Agents wearing tactical gear kicked in the doors of luxury brownstones. They arrested corrupt judges in their chambers, confiscating their hard drives. They dragged police captains out of their suburban homes in handcuffs, loading them into armored transport vehicles. The syndicate bosses realized the leak originated from within their own trusted circles. The precision of the attacks pointed to a highly placed insider. They traced the exposure of their deepest secrets back to the only loose end, Pietro's death, and the missing ledger from his hidden desk drawer. Don Nicoletti summoned me to his heavily fortified mansion on a Sunday night. His head of security called my pager, claiming a main water pipe had burst in the basement, creating a massive flood that threatened his $1 million wine cellar. The urgency in the man's voice sounded rehearsed. The lie felt heavy and obvious. I drove my battered white service van up the winding, tree-lined driveway. I parked near the service entrance at the rear of the property. The estate sat in unnatural silence. The usual guards patrolling the perimeter with aggressive attack dogs were absent. The massive floodlights illuminating the tennis courts remained dark. I walked through the heavy oak kitchen door, holding my plastic supply bucket filled with mops and chemical bottles. I wore my usual uniform, loose navy blue scrubs and rubber-soled nursing shoes. 3 men stepped out of the shadows of the formal dining room. They wore black tactical gear. They held suppressed submachine guns aimed directly at my chest. Don Nicoletti stood behind them. His face looked pale and drawn. Deep purple bags hung under his eyes. His empire was burning to the ground, and he looked entirely desperate. "You found Pietro's book," Nicoletti said. His voice echoed against the custom cherrywood cabinetry and the stainless steel appliances. "A cleaning lady. I lose half my territory. My judges are squealing to the feds, and it's because of the woman who washes my toilets." I dropped my bucket. The hard plastic hit the terracotta tile with a sharp crack. Industrial bleach and soapy water splashed across the floor, creating a slick pool. I ran. I sprinted toward the servants' corridor. The men opened fire. The suppressed weapons made a rapid, breathy sound, like heavy staples punching into a wall. Bullets shattered the cabinetry and shredded the plaster walls around me. Wood splinters and white plaster dust rained down on my shoulders. I knew the mansion intimately. I knew the exact dimensions of every room. I knew the blind spots in the security camera coverage because I dusted the lenses. I knew the location of every exit, every crawl space, every reinforced door. I understood the architecture of their lives better than they did. I shoved through the heavy swinging doors into the commercial-grade laundry room. The air smelled of lavender fabric softener and hot exhaust from the massive gas dryers. I grabbed a gallon jug of industrial floor wax from the metal utility shelf. I hurled it against the heavy oak door frame as I passed into the main hallway. The plastic jug shattered on impact. The viscous, slippery liquid coated the polished marble floor in a thick layer. The first gunman rounded the corner, his weapon raised to his shoulder. His combat boots hit the concentrated wax. His legs shot out from under him. He crashed backward. His skull struck the marble tile with a sickening thud. His gun skittered across the floor, spinning into the baseboards out of his reach. He lay motionless. I reached the narrow spiral staircase used by the cleaning staff to access the upper floors unnoticed. I climbed the metal steps 2 at a time, my rubber soles gripping the textured tread perfectly. I plunged into the darkness of the second floor. Nicoletti had cut the power to this wing to maintain the ambush. I navigated the unlit hallway by memory, trailing my right hand along the expensive silk wallpaper to guide my steps. I reached the master suite at the end of the long corridor. I slipped inside and locked the heavy reinforced door behind me. I threw the deadbolt and slid the solid brass chain into place. The remaining 2 gunmen reached the door seconds later. They pounded on the solid wood with their fists. They stepped back and began shooting the hinges. The brass splintered and groaned under the sustained, concentrated gunfire. I walked to the massive walk-in closet. Rows of custom Italian suits hung in pristine silence, perfectly spaced on wooden hangers. I pulled back a specific section of the cedar paneling near the back wall. The panel swung open on hidden hinges, revealing a laundry chute designed to drop soiled linens directly into the basement utility room. The metal cylinder measured exactly 2 feet across. I squeezed my shoulders into the opening. I crossed my arms tightly over my chest, tucked my chin to my collarbone, and let go. I slid through the walls of the mansion in total darkness. The smooth sheet metal rushed past my ears, cold against my skin. I hit the pile of soft, soiled laundry in the basement with a soft thud. I scrambled off the mountain of high thread count sheets and sprinted to the exterior cellar doors. I unlatched the heavy iron bar, pushed the wooden doors open, and ran into the dense, damp woods surrounding the property. Federal sirens wailed in the distance. The high-pitched noise pierced the quiet night air. I had timed my anonymous tip to the authorities perfectly. I had called the FBI switchboard from a burner phone 10 minutes before arriving at the estate, reporting a massive hostage situation involving illegal firearms. The FBI SWAT teams breached Nicoletti's front gates in armored vehicles just as I reached the safety of my van, which I had parked on the adjacent public service road. I watched the raid through the line of pine trees. Flashbang grenades illuminated the mansion windows in strobes of blinding white light. Heavily armed men shouted through bullhorns, ordering Nicoletti and his remaining crew to surrender. The empire crumbled, systematically dismantled by the woman they had trusted to wash their floors. The power vacuum filled quickly. The old men who commanded through violence and intimidation rotted in federal holding cells, denied bail by the few judges they hadn't corrupted. The streets quieted down. The overt gang wars ended. I bought the penthouse where Pietro died. I used a shell company registered in Delaware, funded by the offshore accounts I had quietly drained using the routing codes and passwords from the ledger. I completely remodeled the space. I replaced the bloody marble with dark Brazilian hardwood. I threw away the velvet drapes and installed motorized solar shades. I sat behind a new heavy oak desk, looking out over the city skyline. The lights of the financial district glittered against the night sky. The black ledger rested in the center of the leather blotter, flanked by 3 new encrypted hard drives containing my expanded databases. A knock sounded at the double oak doors. Darlene, a woman who cleaned the financial district high-rises, walked into the room. She wore her gray uniform and carried her heavy canvas supply bag. She reached into her apron pocket and handed me a small, silver flash drive. "The CEO of Highland Investments," Darlene said. "He leaves his laptop unlocked when he goes to the private executive bathroom. This is his entire personal email archive." I plugged the drive into my secure terminal. I transferred a thick envelope of unbanded $100 bills across the desk. Darlene took the cash, nodded once, and left the room to return to her shift. I built a new dynasty. The service workers, the invisible army of housekeepers, janitors, caterers, and valets became my network. We controlled the city through the absolute leverage of information. We moved through the corporate boardrooms, the private golf clubs, and the bedrooms of the elite. We saw the infidelity. We saw the embezzlement. We saw the bribes. We collected the data. We ruled the shadows. Those who clean up the mess are the only ones who truly know where the bodies are buried. The end.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.